Disclaimer. Whilst this video is lighter in tone than a lot of my other content, it still features topics which can be sensitive to some viewers. For a list of content warnings, please look into the video's description. This video does also go pretty deep into the story of Magic the Gathering, so if you're entering it with questions such as, who is Urza, or what is a Phyrexian, I recommend you first check out my video on the story of Sancha, where I lay out the basics of a lot of what I'll be talking about today. Thank you. Hi, my name is Annie, the Multiversal Librarian, and my goal is to learn all about the many stories of Magic the Gathering. As the world's oldest trading card game, Magic has a vast history of lore. Its multiverse seemingly filled with endless planes, many of them fan favorites, explored in many a set, such as the beloved Ravnica, which has now been seen in a full 10 of them, the mystifying Tarkir, which has been revisited to much praise last year in Dragonstorm, or most recently the beloved duo of Lorwyn and Shadowmoor. Other sets are lost to time, becoming outdated, never to be revisited again, such as Arabia, quite literally just a play on the name Arabia for the set Arabian Nights, or the treacherous Mercadia, which just didn't have much to offer past its place in the Weatherlight saga. And then there are planes which are never explored in their own sets, never playing the central role as a setting for Magic's story, yet which are often fondly remembered by the game's Vorthos as strange mysteries of Magic's ever-expanding universe. One such world is Equilor. Equilor is a plane introduced in the 1999 Planeswalker novel by Lynn Abbey. It is described as a plane on the edge of time by Urza Planeswalker, who is traveling to Equilor alongside his lovable transgender companion, Sancha, seeking allies in his war against the Phyrexians. The plane is incredibly old and mysterious. It is inhabited by people who live for thousands of years and who inhabit an incredible amount of power, despite their seemingly ordinary lives and appearances. Urza attempts to utilize this power to his own ends, but is forced to abruptly leave when he finds out that his homeland, Dominaria, is in dire danger of a Phyrexian invasion. And then Equilor is never seen again, not mentioned ever in a single piece of story from 1999 up until today. Equilor fascinates me. It has fascinated me ever since I first read about it, a world teeming with fascinating stories and potential, which has never been really explored, its whole story splayed out over a few dozen pages. Today I would like to talk about what little we do know about Equilor, what it was like, how the people on it lived, and most importantly, why I think the mystery of Equilor is more important to Magic's story than you might think. Part 1. The origins of Equilor. Is it a name? She asked cautiously.
An old name. The oldest name. The farthest plane. It belongs to a plane on the edge of time.
On the Wikipedia page of Magic's timeline, the first recorded event is listed simply as -100,000. The Equilorians begin their search for enlightenment. This single sentence says a lot about Equilor. The Equilorians are old, so old in fact it's difficult to even compare them to any other beings or events in Magic. The first Elder Dragons on Dominaria were spawned 80,000 years later. 95,000 years before Phyrexia was created, the Equilorians were not only already out there, they were already searching for enlightenment. It took Urza 1,000 years to even reach their plane. They set out at once, with no more preparation than Urza made for any Between Worlds journey. He explained that preparation, and especially directions, weren't important. Walking the Between Worlds wasn't like walking down a path. There was no north or south, left or right, only the background glow of all the planes there were, and, rising out of the glow, a sense of those planes that a walker could reach in a single stride. By choosing the faintest of the rising planes at each step, Urza insisted they would in time arrive at Equilor, the plane on the edge of time. The journey itself is cut down pretty drastically, most likely because 1,000 years of traveling and barely anything else doesn't make for a very entertaining story. The main thing of note that happens is an encounter with other planeswalkers that Urza also sought for counsel.
Be wary,
he warned Sancha.
I do not trust them. Without a plane to bind them, walkers forget what they were. They become predators, unless they go mad.
Knowing Urza fell in the latter category, Sancha stayed carefully in his shadow as they approached a small, fanciful, and entirely illusory pavilion standing by itself on a barren, twilight plain. But the 3 men and 2 women they met there seemed unthreatening. They knew Urza, or knew of him, and welcomed him as a prodigal brother, though Sancha couldn't actually follow their conversation. Planeswalkers converse directly in one another's minds. On this meeting, Sancha encountered other companions that the Planeswalkers kept similarly to how Urza kept her, and attempted to strike up conversation. Unfortunately, this meeting was cut short as a second sun, presumably an attack by another Planeswalker, blew the entire company to smithereens. The pavilion exploded, and they were all forced to planeswalk with Urza just barely saving Sancha's life. Urza laid her on the ground, then cradled her face in his hands.
Don't go,
he whispered. It seemed an incongruous request. Sancha wasn't about to go anywhere. The Between-Worlds had battered her to exhaustion. Her body seemed to have already fallen asleep. She wanted only to close her eyes and join it.
No!
Urza pinched her cheeks.
Stay awake! Stay with me!
Power like fire, countless sharp needles swirled around her. Sancha fought feebly to escape the pain. She pleaded with him to release her.
Live!
He shouted.
I won't let you die now.
Death would have been preferable to the torture flowing from Urza's fingers, but Sancha hadn't the strength to resist his will. Mote by mote, he healed her, and dragged her back from the brink.
Sleep now, if you wish.
Part 2. Old magic is wild. As you may have already picked upon, Planeswalker is a wild book. In my video on Sancha, I have a section titled Old Phyrexia is Extremely Metal. It's a title I'm quite proud of as it reflects something that I often think about when talking about old magic lore. Nowadays, Phyrexians come in many shapes and forms, but they all have a sort of cohesive design to them. When I say Phyrexian, you might ask which color they're aligned with, but generally you have an idea of what I'm talking about. Oil, metal, flesh, yep, that's a Phyrexian. Or Oko with a lot of jewelry. It's kind of up to you. Things weren't so straightforward in old Phyrexia, where Phyrexians were seemingly depicted in all sorts of ways, from the terrifyingly humanoid priest of Yawgmoth, to the very abstract abyssal horror, to my personal favorite, the 90s trash metal album cover of Phyrexian Ghoul. Whilst this obviously speaks to a lack of creative direction at this time, something that was rectified in later sets, I feel it also allowed creativity to flow freely. It is as if we, as players, were finding out what Phyrexia is, alongside with the artists, them discovering it in their own unique ways. I find a lot of old magic to be endearing in a similar way. As someone who wasn't even born when magic was first starting, I love looking at a card like Chaos Orb and seeing the strange time in magic's history that it captures. I love looking at the original art for Force of Will, seeing how it's become so iconic in spite of the fact that it was originally commissioned for a red card, only getting later color shifted into blue, unlike Therese Nilsson, who's been recently color shifted into red. Like 7 years ago, but I only found out about it doing research for this video. Blissful ignorance, baby. My favorite relic of this time, however, are the sunglasses of Urza. These sunglasses existed long before we ever knew who Urza was. These sunglasses are directly responsible for some of the worst nightmares to ever possess the multiverse. Fuck you, sunglasses of Urza. Go away. Go resist UV light somewhere else. Planeswalker is a book which exemplifies this feeling to me. It is a book which seeks to capture about 3,000 years of travel in about 300 pages. This makes for an extremely weirdly paced and confusing experience to read, yet it also allows for some extremely strange ideas to flourish. The world of Sarah's realm, in which Sancha and Urza stop by before heading off to Equilor, I don't think gets enough credit for how unnerving of a place it is. We are talking about a place of floating islands where you don't need to eat, and everything is cast in permanent sunlight. It is seemingly heaven, but in the novel, Sancha is actually deeply disturbed by it. The notorious planeswalker who presents as a pavilion, who I'm referencing in a second video in a row now, Manatarka, is also here. For like 3 paragraphs before she gets blown into smithereens and is never seen again. R.I.P. Manatarka, you'd have been a way better protagonist than Urza, I'm sure. There are also a host of icy, deserted worlds that Urza and Sancha stop by on their run away from the Phyrexians. These are all frozen over, with stories never to be told, and have seemingly been defeated by the test of time. There is, however, one place that has seemingly defeated the test of time. Equilor, of course. Part 3. The Culture of Equilor. She shed her armor and filled her lungs with air that was unlike any other. Old, she said after a few moments. It's as if everything's finished. Not dead, just outgrowing and changing. Even the mountains are smoothed down, like they've been standing too long but nothing's come to replace them. She gestured toward the great, dark lump that dominated the landscape like a risen loaf of bread. Somehow I expected an edge to have sharp angles. When they finally arrived in Equilor, after over 1,000 years of travel, they were more than a little surprised at what they had found. Equilor wasn't grand or glorious. It was ancient and full of mysteries.
I expected a plane where everything had been put to use. Not like this. Neglected and left fallow.
On the edge of time sat seemingly only a single village, inhabited by the Equilorians. They were humans, or at least humanoids, living in stone houses with perfectly white interiors. Sancha sat in a white chair, at a white table, eating stew from a white bowl. Everything that could have had a chosen color, including the floor and the walls, was white and sparkling clean. The Equilorians also seemed to be vegetarian, with Sancha getting her first taste of what very much sounds like tofu here. The stew was plain, but tasty. If there was time, she'd like to see the garden where they grew their vegetables, and the fields where they harvested their grain. It was a meatless stew, somehow that didn't surprise her, with egg drizzled in the broth, and pale chunks, like cubes of soft cheese, a bit smaller than her thumb, taking the place of meat. The chunks had the texture of soft cheese, but not the taste. Indeed, they had no taste that Sancha could discern, and she was tempted to leave them in the bowl until the woman asked her if the meal was pleasing to a wanderer's palate. As I've said in the intro, the Equilorians were supremely long-lived. This does not appear to be because of some kind of evolutionary goal or even magic. They simply are long-lived humans. Sancha meets an Equilorian toddler and is later told that it is 80 years old already. The children had rushed to their mother, babbling in their own language, offering apologies and excuses for why they weren't in bed, Sancha guessed, and maybe blaming her, though there were no pointed fingers or condemning glances. Tessu calmed them quickly. If the youngest was indeed 80, Tessu had had several lifetimes in which to learn the tricks of motherhood. She didn't urge them into the larder, however, but outside, to the sunrise gathering place. Thanks to their long lifespans, the Equilorians have seemingly conquered boredom, as well as the need for glory. As sunrises went, it was not spectacular. The air was clear. There were no clouds anywhere to add contrast or movement to the surprisingly slow progression of color and light on the mountainside. But that, Sancha realized, was Equilor's mystery and revelation. Those who dwelled at the edge of time had gone past the need for the spectacular. They had learned to appreciate the subtlest differences. They had conquered boredom even more effectively than the perfect folk of Sarah's realm. They could wait forever and a day, which Sancha supposed was a considerable accomplishment, though nothing she wished to emulate. But in spite of overcoming their need for glory, they did not overcome their need for worship, specifically worship of the mountain that towered above their village. You will bathe before sunrise? Sancha answered in the same tone. if I may bathe unobserved, the mountain will see you, and their worship is deserved. The mountain of Equilor is a place of incredible power. It is where all Equilorians go once they reach a certain point in their life. It is not disclosed what that point is, presumably when they are very old and feel that the time is right. In the mountain, they create a sort of hyper-powerful hive mind that observes the multiverse all around them, as well as the world below. You are unwell? Tessu asked discreetly from the shadows as Zansha wrestled with unfamiliar clasps and plackets. It did see me. Tessu failed to repress a chuckle. They will not harm you, Zansha. Watching the sunrise wasn't a mere act of meditation either. It was actually a way for the Equilorians to communicate with the elders. Brilliant light suddenly began to flash from the cave mouths, as if each contained a mirror. She blinked rapidly and to no useful effect. Each cave mouth had its own rhythm. No matter how Zansha tried, her eyes were quickly, painfully blinded by reflected sunlight.
You'll learn,
the ancient chortled, while tears ran down Zansha's cheeks. The dazzle ended. Part 4. The powers that be. I still remember my first time playing Magic. It was at a macrobiotics summer camp, where one of the instructors brought a pre-release box full of old bulk. He taught us how to play a format called Trash, where you play with one library and can play any card from your hand as a face-down, 5-color, untapped land. You can try it at home if you want, it's pretty fun. I remember being immediately fascinated. The game was fun, but more importantly I felt like I was just seeing the tip of the iceberg, only a few of the endless combinations that I could make if I got to know the game better. I am not surprised to remember that soon after, my dad got us 2 standard precons. For all my youthful swag, I am in fact old enough to remember standard precons, and we were exploring the world of Magic together ever since. The instructor allowed me to keep a few cards from back then. I have mostly lost or given them away now. All I really have left is this Noggle Bridgebreaker. It's interesting, the same way that Noggle Bridgebreaker was then a way for me to peer at an impossibly large multiverse. Frankly, bigger than I ever could have expected. It is now the only way for me to look back at those beginnings. Equilor brings me back to this feeling. The feeling that somewhere out there is a fascinating, mysterious world, and yet now I can only observe it from a few dozen pages. This feeling is helped by the fact that the Equilorians are written in a way that makes them seem much more powerful than they let on. Urza is able to arrive in Equilor uninterrupted, yet is later told that the defenses of Equilor are so strange and powerful, he wouldn't even be able to find it if he wasn't allowed to. Phyrexia was seemingly the biggest evil in the multiverse at this time, yet the Equilorians simply shrug them off as small people with small ambitions. Smaller dreams. But nowhere is the subtle power of Equilor illustrated better than an exchange between the Equilorian Tessu and the Phyrexian Zansha. Those who go up the mountain do not always come down. Urza's a walker. I've seen him melt mountains with his eyes. Not here. I'm not too surprised that Equilor has somewhat of a cult following, or is at least talked about a lot more than many of Magic's other forgotten worlds. Equilor is intriguing, it is mysterious, it is filled with untapped power. And of course, where there's power, there's Urza fucking Planeswalker to exploit it. Part 5. The abandoning of Equilor. Despite their focus on their cave-dwelling ancestors, the folk of Equilor weren't a morbid people. They laughed with one another, loved their children, and took genuine delight in the small events of daily life. They argued, held grudges, and gossiped among themselves and about the elders, who, despite their collective spirits, were not without individual foibles. Kyodos, Zansha learned, was known to be long-winded and supremely self-confident. As Urza's time in the caves had lengthened, the household began to joke that Kyoda's had found a soulmate, a notion that distressed Zansha. Idyllic ways notwithstanding, Equilor was not a place where she wanted to spend eternity. Urza didn't travel the multiverse for over 1,000 years for nothing. While Zansha stayed in the village and lived with the Equilorians, Urza began communing with the elders, namely one elder named Kyodas. If you know anything about Urza, you will not be surprised to find out that he had begun talking to Kyodas about weaponizing Equilor.
Equilor is where I belong. Kyodas and the others have so much knowledge, but they've done nothing with it. Look around us, Zansha. These folk need leadership, vision, and I will give it to them when I am finished. Equilor will be the jewel of the multiverse.
Urza spent dozens of days up on the mountain, becoming intoxicated with his ambitions. It had gone to a point that the Equilorians urged Zansha to talk to him, which he did, but with no great success. They're not interested. They say they've put greatness behind them and they're angry with Romam and Tessu for letting you stay with them so long. They say something's got to be done.
Of course something's got to be done, and I'll get Kyodas to do it. He's on the brink. He's been on the brink for days now. I left him alone to get his thoughts in order. They're a collective mind, you know. Each elder separately and all the elders together. They've become stagnant, but I'm getting them moving again. Once I get Kyodas persuaded, he'll give the sign to the others and the dam will burst. Oh, you'll see.
Tessu said those who go up the mountain don't always return. Be careful, Urza. These people have power.
Tessu and Romam? Forget Tessu and Romam. They might as well be blind. Yes, they've got power. All Equilor had undreamed power, but they turned their back on power and they've forgotten how to use it. Even Kyodas. I'm going to show them what greatness truly is.
Thankfully for everyone, Urza included, Kyodas had chosen to spare us more of his nonsense and made up his mind. It helped that the Shard of 12 Worlds keeping Dominaria safe from the rest of the multiverse had been brought down at this point, and made Urza's homeland prone to another Phyrexian invasion, forcing Urza to remember what he came to Equilor for and returning to defend his homeland. Of course, he couldn't stop before delivering one more, completely in touch with reality, speech to the Equilorians.
The future's ended before it began. I cannot stay to lead you, and Kyodas has already begun to waver in the face of stagnant opposition. But they have lifted me into the night, and shown me a frightening sight. The fortress I made around the plains where I was born has been brought down by a misguided fool. As my brother and I undid the Thran, so I have been undone by ignorance. But I can go back, and I will go back. Equilor, however, is on its own. You will have to complete my visions without my guidance.
The household made a fair show of grief. From Pakuya to Bria, they said how sorry they were that they wouldn't get to live the future Urza and Kyodas had promised them. The entire community flattered Urza's righteousness and strength of character. They wished him well and offered to make him a feast in honor of his departure for Dominaria. Zansha was relieved when Urza declined. She didn't think she'd have the stomach for an extended display of insincerity. Tessu had been right. It was for the best that Urza left Equilor thinking the decision had been his own. It took them 100 Dominarian years to walk the between worlds from Equilor to Dominaria, but in the spring of the 3210th year after Urza's birth, Zansha finally stood in the world where she'd been destined to sleep. And thus ends our recorded history of Equilor. Urza and Zansha would go on more adventures together, as they would return to Dominaria to fight the Phyrexians once again. Urza would be able to utilize his talent for committing unspeakable atrocities on someone who actually deserved it, while Zansha would actually go on to find herself a love interest. If any of that sounds like something that interests you, I recommend you check out my full-length video on Zansha over here. There is something fascinating to me about the way magic story was treated back in the 90s versus the way it is treated today. When magic storytelling is lacking today, it feels like it is mostly because wizards aren't investing enough of their resources back into their story. Reading something like Planeswalker, I get the feeling that all the resources were invested in. There wasn't a lot of them, sure, but everyone tried to tell a good story. Of course, One can simply laugh Equilor off as another on the laundry list of seemingly important things and planes that the creative director team has simply forgotten about later. But I believe there is more to it. Equilor is a relic of a time when wild magic was flowing through a game still in development. A time of wild ideas, a time of sunglasses of Urza and absolutely insane artworks. It is a relic of a time when no one knew what they were doing, and no one could know, because it was never done before. Whilst Equilor is most likely not the destination of current day magic, it is most certainly a fascinating place in its journey, and a silent reminder that there is no prize for perfection, only an end to pursuit. Thank you. Hi, this is the rare outro Annie appearance, because I kind of have a lot of things to say today. Number 1, subscribe to Gitka, my camera woman. She's been doing an absolutely awesome job on my last 2 videos, and she's planning to start her own vlog series pretty soon, so go check her out. Number 2, subscribe to Highjog. They are a musician who has made some wonderful tunes that I've been able to use in this video because they let people use their music for free. Isn't that sweet? Number 3, subscribe to me. Hey, I'm pretty cool. Number 4, this channel now has an official Discord server. We do lore discussion, you can talk to me, you can talk to like-minded people, we jam the occasional game of Commander or else. We have Belle who will play pretty much any format with you. There's been some $30 vintage being jammed as of late, so we've been playing frickin' Ravnica Innistrad Standard lately. And I have realized that all of Modern is just Innistrad and Ravnica. So that's been fun. And yeah, it's a very nice place, and if you want to join the community there, I highly recommend that you do. With all that said, thank you once again for watching. Thank you for being here. Have a good one.